Segment 2, Gold and Black Live, and Stacy is back in the green room getting ready with Kyle for segment 3. We'll talk a little Purdue football. But this is always an extra treat for me because you don't get a chance, to talk with a living legend, but a boyhood hero as well. And we don't gush a lot in this show, but when we have Rick Mount on, it's always special, and he's always gracious enough and joins us. Try not to bug the heck out of you, Rick, but we appreciate that you join us once a year, and your insight into this game is about as good as it gets. And yet the Boilermakers will be on here in an hour when they take on Penn State. This tournament, this Big Ten tournament stuff, is an interesting opportunity for a team like Purdue. What have you seen from the Boilermakers so far? And you've seen a team that's gotten better as the year goes on, I assume.
Well, I think at first of the season they wasn't expecting much out of them, but I've been watching them in the last half of the season. Hammond's finally found his niche and figured it out, and I think the big thing, and Raphael Davis, I don't know if he worked on his shot during the summer, but he's got a better touch on it, and he's playing well. But the big thing, and I believe this, going into the tournament, nobody has rim protection like Purdue's got with Hammonds and Haas up front, and the rebounding with those two big guys, and I think that's going to help them in the tournament. And people say, "Well, how far do you think they'll go?" And I think I'd be disappointed if they don't get the Elite Eight. And people go, "Are you kidding me?" And I said, "No, because that rim protection, and that helps the other players out front to play a little bit more in your grill type defense." Because if I'm going to get beat, there's not going to be any layups, and that's what Purdue's got right now.
You know, it's interesting, and certainly in your playing days, when you guys got in the 1969 NCAA tournament, you get used to playing guys in your league all the time, and then you get out of it in the NCAA tournament, and you see teams that haven't necessarily seen you. Now, I understand scouting may be a little bit different than it was when you played, but how big of a deal is that? Because I think you bring up a very interesting point about the fact that Purdue has something that not many teams in the country have in that rim protection. A guy with 2 7-footers that can really dominate it inside.
Yeah, that makes a difference because, like you said, in different conferences, there's nothing like that. And I was, watching them play Ohio State on TV, which was a heck of a game, or anybody, Michigan State or what. There's hardly any layups, and I remember back when we played the UCLA, you knew you wasn't going to get any layups, so that puts quite a bit of pressure on you shooting the ball from the outside. So they're going to. I really do. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. But the thing is, they're going to. The key is we talked about the big guys and Davis, but the two keys in them going far will be Mathias and Stevens.
Yeah.
If they can shoot the ball on a consistent basis, that's the key right there. Because you got pretty good stuff on every place else, but those two guys are going to have to step up and shoot the ball well.
I was just going to ask you about that because we always get to the shooters when we're talking with you, and certainly Kendall Stevens has been been a guy that, and we've got a couple questions I want to get to as well, but from some of our chat folks. But interesting in terms of streaky, maybe I don't know if he'd lost confidence, but they just haven't gone in yet. You've seen Dakota Mathias really evolve to some extent. Evaluate those two guys in terms of that, and what have you seen from watching them this year?
Well, Stevens got hurt, and that thumb problem, and he was out for a while. And that was a key for Mathias because he got to start, and he got had a couple of good games that he shot the ball well, so he got that, what I call game confidence in himself. And now Stevens is coming back off that injury, but he's not going to break the lineup. But he's coming off that bench, so he's starting. His thumb is starting to, I think, healing up because he had a pretty good night the other night, I think.
Yep.
That's kind of a blessing because then that brought Mathias' confidence, and because he wasn't shooting the ball well at all at first of the season, he couldn't throw it notion, but now he is. So that sometimes you say, well, injuries. Well, sometimes it's a positive. Sometimes that another guy can get his confidence.
RickMountShootingSchool.com, and nobody teaches shooting like Rick does, certainly in the country. And yet you look at a guy like Mathias mechanically, early on, in my layperson's view of it, he might have been trying to hurry it just a little bit. What were you seeing anything in his motion that has changed, or is he just, he looks to me like he has pretty decent form from that standpoint and good rotation on the basketball. How do you view it?
Yeah, just like we talked about, he got his game confidence.
Yeah.
So many guys, if they had game confidence, they step their game up. If you don't have confidence in your shot right now, you're not believing in it, it's not going to go in. I don't care how good a form you got. You got to have that great confidence in yourself. That's one thing I had. I had great form, but I had great confidence. And this is where this has come about because of Stevens' injury. So, and now Stevens needs to get, I think he's starting to get his confidence back, but you see when he first came off that injury or had that injury, he lost his confidence, and he wasn't, when he let go of that ball, you just say it wasn't going to go in. So big thing, 98% right now of basketball is in your mind at Purdue. It's the mental thing.
Yeah. I look at on your website, Rick, I'm looking at a picture of you against Lucius Allen putting a jumper in your first game at Mackey Arena. Not the famous Sports Illustrated picture with Lou Alcindor or Kareem Abdul in the background, but you're shooting off your wrong foot. Take us back to that story. You have so many great stories that we would like to get to, but your first game, obviously freshmen were not eligible. You had a foot injury, a plate in your shoe that you played with. What do you remember from that, just in terms of that excitement of going into that game against a dynasty team like UCLA, but with a talented upstart group that you had at Purdue?
Well, that was the big thing that was the recruiting thing that Coach King and Coach Bob and King, and they threw at you. A brand new arena, first game, UCLA, dedication game and everything. And it was all building up to that, and in about 3 weeks before that, I went in for a layup and got a stress fracture in my left foot, and I was in a cast. That's 3 weeks before the game. And I was in that cast for about a week and a half or whatever, and Coach Bob said, go over to Doc Combs and Doc Ferguson, and they're over at the hospital. They're going to take your cast off, and you're going to play with a broken foot. And I said, okay. Well, I was up for anything. I was young, and I wasn't afraid of nothing. And they went over there, cut that cast off, and they said, we're going to put this aluminum sole we made up. I don't know if they did it over there at the hospital or in their garage, but they put aluminum sole in there, and I went over there and practiced on it, and I couldn't. I didn't feel the pain, but it was hard to move laterally. And then when you go up on your toes, that aluminum sole would bend, and it's kind of like a rocking chair in your shoe. So they cut the aluminum sole, the aluminum inner sole, and cut the toes out of it. And now when I go up on my toes, I wouldn't bend it, and so that's how it all got started. And then I played in the dedication game, and you were there, and a lot of people were there. If I if I didn't break my foot, stress fracture my foot, we'd have beat them because I had I had a little bit of trouble going laterally, and I still had a pretty good night, but and I played with a broken foot for half the season. A lot of guys now, they break their foot, they shut it down for 6-8 weeks. I was playing on a broken foot.
I think 27 points, and certainly one of the amazing games. You know, you think about the history of Mackey Arena and all the great games that have been played there, but you'd be hard pressed to have a better game than that one in the history of the building, and that was the first game ever played. Let's now, and I don't want to, because you're still a young guy, but it's today the 46th anniversary of your game against Miami of Ohio. Now people say, well, that's not a big deal, but that was a Sweet 16 game, the Purdue's first NCAA tournament game ever, and played up in Madison, Wisconsin. A relatively easy win, but a costly one in terms of that. Tell us the story of that game, and then obviously the next day, 2 days later against Marquette. But you lost a big guy in Chuck Davis. But take us through what that experience was for you guys in Madison, Wisconsin, in the NCAA regionals.
Well, we had confidence. We stepped on the floor. We felt at that point we could beat anybody, and we played Miami, Ohio. I think it was at Purdue, or was it over there?
No,
I think it was at
Purdue.
It was
here, and you struggled actually.
Yeah,
against
and we beat them up pretty good, and we knew that we were going to beat them. I mean, we weren't overconfident, but when we stepped on the floor, we were pretty good, and we beat them. But we lost Davis, our big 7-footer, which. He always played Lou Alcindor really good, and so he's out for the rest of the season. But we ended up beating them, and then we played Marquette beat up Kentucky pretty good. Also, really surprised us. We thought we might play Kentucky instead of Marquette, and so it was us against Marquette and Al McGuire and.
Crazy environment.
All that kind of good, all that kind of good stuff. And I always remember this. It was late in the game. It was close. It wasn't. Nobody ran away from each other, and so it come down. They got the ball, and they with 20-some seconds to go, and Al McGuire called timeout, and it's tied up, and they're going for their last shot. And a guy named Dean the Dream Meminger, he was holding it out there and dribbling. It got down to about 8 seconds. He started making a move, and he got into the lane about free throw and put up a jumper, and it hit on the right side of the rim, and a guy named Cobb rebounded it for Marquette, and he was going up for it with probably 2 seconds to go, and Faber put the hammer on it. And so he's there. He's at the line with 2 seconds to 1 second, 1 second to go, and he's got 2 shots. And I always remember this. I'm in the blockout lane, and he gets the ball. And he looks at me before he starts his shot. He looks at me. He says, "It's over." I'm not. What am I going to say? Okay, make them then. Yeah. So the first one that goes up and hits the neck of the rim, and now I'm looking at him, and he ain't looking back at me now. He ain't saying it's over now, and he choked it. He shot an air ball. That put us in overtime. And they got the ball at the end of the overtime, and they're holding it again. But it's not Meminger. It's I can't think of the forward's name. He played in the ABA.
Thomas. I'm trying to think of who you're thinking of.
I can't.
George Thompson.
Yeah, George Thompson.
Yeah.
Faber's got him out there on the wing, and he's holding it, and it got down to 10 or 12 seconds, and Faber's on his knees, and he's got the ball.
Yeah.
He stole it from him. So we called timeout with about, I think it was about, I can't remember, that's a long time, 12, 14 seconds, and King comes in. Now, see, we're going to mount the ball, and he's going to go to the right, and Jerry Johnson's going to get in the way out there, set a pick. He didn't set a very good pick, but it was good enough.
Yeah.
And our guys were telling me, says, King's over there cussing that we waited too long. We waited too long, and he's cussing at us. And I get the ball, and I take a couple dribbles to the right, and it was about a 20-footer, probably 22-footer. Hit nothing but net, and we go to the Final Four.
Yeah, what a great story, and an example of a game, because that game was not your best shooting game, but you had an opportunity to make the play, and probably the single greatest shot in the history of Purdue basketball. Hard to argue that. We actually, Rick, on our screen are showing that picture of that great shot as well. We've got a couple questions for you, Rick. When I was at Purdue, I always thought that Rick shot the ball equally well, whether he was open or had a hand in his face. It's not important what I remember, but how do you remember? Well, you obviously, you physically got whacked as much as having hands in your face. I mean, talk about how guys defended you. The Jim Clemens of the world at Ohio State were always physical with you especially. But did teams defend you differently or try to?
Oh, I always like for somebody to be up on me. I invited them to come into my body so I could get away from them better. But I did, shoot some wide open shots too. Not very many because they were always up on you. But I could get up in the air, and I gathered strong, and I had great legs, and I could get with quick footwork. I could get up over people, 6'4", and I could jump like crazy off my jump shot. And but I really, they'd beat you up. The Big Ten was rough, and they'd beat you up, but that's part of it, and I like that. People say, well, something about hatchet man. I said, well, back when I played, everybody had a hatchet man, and they'd be sent in there to knock you on the floor or try to break your arm or whatever, and I used to just love the guy just hammer me, and I'd knock it in from about 20, and he'd knock me on my back. And I never said anything to anybody. My dad always taught me not to be jabbering with the referees or other players because it gets you out of focus. And I just get up and walk the free throw line, not even change my expression, and knock them in. And but I'd like to take it off 1-2 bounces, maybe 3 bounces. That was my favorite.
How do you, and obviously with your shooting schools and all the work you do with kids today, both the boys and girls players, what's the one thing that they're missing now? Because we're talking about big article in Sports Illustrated this week about just the flow of play and how it's changed, obviously, even since your days and in the days of John Wooden, etc. But what's the thing that kids need that don't do in shooting that they really need to do more of? Is it as simple as saying they got to have more reps, or is it do they do something that's technically different than the way that you were raised?
Well, I see a lot of bad footwork. Footwork is everything, and getting into that and gathering on that shot and getting the leverage down low, and then having the leverage with your arms up in the upper part of your shot so you can jump and lift. I see a lot of toe shooters, not leg shooters in the game now, because when they're young, they get out there. The worst thing to ever happen to young kids is the three-point line. Yes. Because when they get they're in the ever gym, and when they're 4th and 5th graders, they're out there shoving it and not using their legs, not even having an idea how to shoot a basketball the right way. And then they grow up like that, and you see a lot of flat shooters that can't get it off. They don't use their legs. I was a leg shooter. I used my legs to get myself up in the air. Now you see a lot of toe shooters and things like that. And you see a lot of coaches, their offense is designed around stand-toe shooting, you know, toe and push, toe and push. Don't get everything under the get your legs bent and get your hand under the ball right above your forehead, and getting that leverage where you can jump up and be strong. And that's where I see now the really good shooters do that, but there's not as many. Back when I played, it was a lot of everybody uses their legs.
All right, well, Rick, always interested. We could go on for about 2 hours on this at least, but we appreciate your time away from all the basketball that's going on, and I'm glad that you've absolutely guaranteed Purdue's going to get in the Elite Eight. So I'm going to give you a hard time on that, but I do appreciate that, and I hope you're right from that standpoint. Also, if you're interested, you got kids, grandkids that are interested in shooting, Rick Mount Shooting Schools. .com is the place that you can find out, and Rick is still as active as he's ever been doing that. Rick, thanks so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the tournament today, and hopefully a good long run for the Boilermakers.
Okay, Alan, good talking with you.
All right, take care. Thanks again, Rick. All right, we're going to come back here in 2 minutes, and we'll bring in Kyle Charters and Stacy Clarity, and we will talk Purdue spring football, and look forward to doing that well in our final segment, Gold and Black Live. By the way, Wisconsin looking like they're going to safely land in the semifinals. They're up 8 with about 2 minutes to go in the game. So we'll see you in a couple minutes on Gold and Black Live.